You know, that question, when I started the Forgotten Project, was I naive? And yeah, I was. I was naive to think that I can approach these issues in the way I did without experiencing the kind of controversy I have.
I was working in the center, and I found in a drawer some photographs by Lincoln Clark's of the women that came to my shelter. And what I learned was that he dropped off shots for the women that he took of them, and the deal was they would pick them up. And the first that I learned that a woman was missing was Sheila Egan. She never came to pick up her portrait. It reached more of a feverish pitch in about 1999 when the Missing Women's Task Force released a poster of the women that were missing at that time.
That year we had a disagreement about some things that she was doing, and at first I thought that that was why she wasn't phoning. She was stubborn, I was stubborn. But after a few months, I knew that there was something wrong.
When I had finally talked to the police, I was under the understanding that Marnie was the first person missing. Little did I know, she was number 26.
The numbers were just incredible. And many of the women, you know, we all knew one or two, and, you know, and women that were walking with us one year, gone missing the next year. They knew at that time that there was a serial killer. They had already identified that. And they weren't telling the public.
It went from bad to worse, to ridiculous, to unbelievable. What we have is a national disgrace that occurred here in Vancouver, and we didn't stop it.
It was around supper time, I think. I got a page, and it was Mark Chernoff. And he said, they're searching the farm. And I said, what farm? And he said, the Picton farm. I just said, oh my God. We should have had him in '99. We didn't have enough in '98, but we had enough in August of '99, and we should have had him. I just started thinking of numbers. And you know, I was thinking 12, 13, 14 women that probably died in that time when he really should have been in custody.
This case is now the largest serial killer investigation in Canadian history.
During the trial and in the pretrial proceedings, there were little glimpses of the lives of the victims, but the focus has been almost exclusively on Robert Pickton. The focus on this perpetrator excludes the public from what happened to these women. And they become sort of a catalog of body parts and DNA smears on walls. When she makes these works public, that'll change the focus back to where it needs to be for us as a society to look at the problems that led to these killings. Seeing those paintings in the back room and seeing the paintings in the front room raised a lot of questions for me about Pamela. What would make a person who was building a career on beautiful pictures, what would possess her to take on this project that dredged up the worst possible aspects of human behavior?
We started hearing all of this incredibly brutal stuff. We couldn't tell the story. I couldn't do my full job because of the publication bans that were in place, and they were very strict. They found, 3 heads in buckets out on the farm. Some of them had, I think all of them had bullet holes in them. The heads had been bisected, probably with a reciprocating saw. They had the hands inside the halves of the heads, and they were resting on the feet.
Well, we knew she'd gone missing, of course. So then it was about 2001. If they find DNA on any of the women, they send the Victim Assistance Services along with the RCMP, and they make a phone call to you and they tell you that they're coming out to your home and that they're bringing victim services with them. They don't tell you anything else until they get there. And that morning, we sat at my kitchen table, and there must have been two RCMP, I believe, and about 3 victim assistants women. And the one RCMP said, "How would you like it?" And I said, "Give it to me straightforward and direct, don't beat around the bush." And he said, "We found DNA on the Pickton farm of your sister. And as it stands, Robert Pickton's going to be charged with your sister's murder." I think the biggest thing with me is, you know, I've let go of my sister. I know she's in the best hands she could be in. But when you think about how they were murdered, and when you're sitting in that courtroom and you're being told that they're strung up on meat cleavers and they're being cut open from top to bottom and they're being degutted and chopped up into small little pieces, like, these are real people. These were women. They weren't just prostitutes and druggies on the streets.
In 1997, 14 women were found dead or went missing from the east side. 14 women in 1 year. Can you imagine if that happened in West Vancouver? You can't. Well, behind that brushstroke that might look violent, violently executed, or that slash in the canvas, or the color of blood that might represent something along the lines of the woman's death, I think that because there's a person behind the act of violence, which would be me in this case, that there's going to be not necessarily a good reaction. It'll mimic the idea of being able to blame someone. And so that would be me in this case. And so I don't think it'll be received well, that part, for sure. Some people really need to be woken up to the idea that this is really happening and that it's time to change. It's not about memorializing a woman or any of these women. I mean, I don't mean to be so harsh when I say that, because that's not why I'm really painting them. It's not to memorialize them. It's to have them stare us back as a society in the face in our faces. I just have this vision, you know, I can't always convey things with a word. I started painting the faces February 2006. It's days before July 2007. And I'm just below 20, so there's 69 of them that I'm painting. I can't say when I'll have them done.
Vancouver is a very small city. It's a minuscule place. You can drive through it in 15 minutes. It's not London. It's not Marseille or Mexico City. Thousands of square miles. We've only got 12 blocks to worry about.
The Downtown Eastside, where I walk in the capacity of a beat officer, the place is like a goldfish bowl of society's problems. Drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health problems, crime, poverty, you name it, it's there.
I think most urban settings have areas that are similar. However, that, you know, the neighborhood has the highest reported number of sexual assaults in the city, which is to say that the numbers are through the roof.
We had 2 people stabbed over here. We had a girl stabbed on the steps. And then last welfare day, another girl got stabbed in front of the door here. Not this door, but the other door.
I called on my cell phone, 911, said I want to report a person missing. It's a friend of mine, the missing persons department gives me a call at work. And I said, look, I know Sarah, she's missing, she just didn't run away. And then he started talking about, well, you know, women like, you know, that work the streets and stuff like that, they go from city to city. You know, they show up again. That's exactly what he said, they show up again.
It starts from the chief and works its way down. So you've got ranking officers who are behaving in racist and sexist manners, and you follow that lead. Because it's been drilled into you and ingrained into you that you do as your superiors do. The women who sell their bodies for sex, they did not deserve anything.
In my search for Sarah, I put out lots of posters. I was putting them up everywhere. I walked the streets day in and day out. I had them on my car. I got a couple of tips, but the one we're talking about now is Bill Hiscox. He called and he said, Willie, a pig farmer, has all of these women's clothing with blood on them on their farm. And Lisa Yelds, she is the one that told him this story.
I have a stepsister who was very close with Willie and was also doing odd jobs for Willie as well. One of them was cleaning his trailer a lot. She started to notice things, girls' clothing, IDs, inhalers. And she says, you know, Bill, I think this is where all those women are going.
We had a number of problems. Lisa Yelds, who was Mr. Hiscox's friend, was extremely anti-police. In no uncertain terms, would not cooperate with the police. Everyone agreed this was extremely compelling, but everyone also said, you'll never get a warrant on that. I ran Picton for a criminal record, and the only 2 entries I got on him were attempt murder, forcible confinement, and they were stay of proceedings. And I remember I just thought, this is the kind of guy I'm looking for.
She already knew and was already aware of Picton, and she already knew where the farm was. It was, let's see if Bill knows where it is. And I took her straight to the farm and said, this is the man you need to be looking at. Nobody else, look at this guy. This is really freaky in there.
I felt strongly that an undercover operation was what we needed to do, which I communicated to Coquitlam RCMP and said, look, we'll help you with surveillance. We just can't initiate it ourselves because it's in your backyard. And so that's really where it was at, and then it just died. I didn't know how to take it to the next level, and I expected, and this is, you know I said this in my evidence, there was an absence of anyone who I worked with saying to me, this is how we take it to the next level. this is what we do. Or the homicide guys saying, Lori, this is a serial killer, you're right, let's take it to the next level. There just wasn't that leadership.
There was jurisdictional problems between the RCMP and the BPD, and they never pursued it. And more women continued to die.
I decided that I was going to reenact the killing or the death of these women. And something strange happened when I did this. It felt emotionally like I had pierced the skin of an individual. Like it was just, I had carried a lot of that with me to a point where it really disturbed me. I guess the whole idea behind it was to go back to those wounds and to stitch them up and then cover up the stitching, and it would only just show traces of maybe some sort of story about that individual. I'm doing that not just with the stitching, but also with newspaper clippings, so the influence of media in their life. You know, the public and with the media and the stories that have been told. So what the public really knows and how there's this placement of responsibility on this killer, you know. It's almost like there's a really big chance of society in general just really placing the blame on that person, that individual, so that there's no social blame. Well, why did this happen in the first place? If a family member comes to me, or there's been a few that have sent me emails with pictures, then I'm going to respect what they're trying to do, right? But I still have to make a fine balance between that and the creative process, which sometimes is a challenge. Even though I don't like really making the deals with my collectors, I'm still making these deals, and I'm purposely making large-scale works so that I could increase my revenue to pay for the faces. $22,000. That's for that size of work. For something bigger and for something that's a commission, it would normally be about $35,000. So that's about 70 grand. So you guys are going from that to 50. So but you're getting already the extra 30% off for that. If I buy all of the aluminum frames with this one company, what would normally be about $1,500 would be about $7,000. So that times 69. Then the paints themselves cost me about $600 in paint supplies times 69. I'd say this project's gonna cost probably about $150,000. And because I estimated that much, Murphy's Law is gonna be, $300,000. I'm never really good at that whole estimating thing. Well, it's just not what we agreed upon, the dollar amount.
They had a detective by the name of Kim Rossmo in their employment, one of the most renowned criminal profilers probably in the world.
Kim Rossmo first began to come to my attention when we started hearing about this former beat cop who was doing a PhD in, geographic profiling at Simon Fraser, and he was developing this method of identifying crime through mathematical processes.
In the 5 years I was in the Vancouver Police Department Geographic Profiling section, we worked cases for the FBI, the German police, the Belgian Gendarmerie, New York Police Department, Los Angeles Police Department, literally all over the world. I went back 20 years, found the number of unfound missing women from the Skid Road area, which is quite small, until we get to 95, and then things spike. Any explanation for this has to account for the following. Why are we seeing this in Vancouver, and we're not seeing it in other Skid Roads in other cities? Why are we not finding any bodies? And most important, why is this just happening with women and not men? Major Crime put forward a number of theories, none of which could explain all of those questions. The only answer that could explain them all that we could see was a serial killer. The response to my report was that, hey, we've had years to find all these missing people. You give us another 5 years and this so-called spike of Rosmos will flatten out.
It was obvious that there were serious personality issues in the Vancouver Police Department.
It was really a story of, I think, very poor senior management running a very important agency.
The people in our organization that could have championed Picton as a very viable suspect, they were still saying, well, where else could they be?
These women are missing, but we haven't found their bodies. We don't know that they've, met up with foul play. They're simply missing.
At the same time in Vancouver, there were a series of garage robberies happening on the west side. Nobody was hurt, but people were frightened. And the mayor at the time, Philip Owen, decided to offer a $100,000 reward for information in those cases. But then, on television, he was asked about the missing women and about a reward in the cases of the missing women.
We're not going to put up a $100,000 reward to have a location service.
It's not our job. People are going to go somewhere. That's their business. It's not our job to locate them.
I was marginalized by Major Crime. They did form the one investigative team to look at it, but they were under-resourced. Neither agency was willing to pursue it, VPD and RCMP. After the work on the missing women case, they didn't ask me for a single geoprofile.
He was summarily dismissed by the VPD, and he had to take his work elsewhere, even though Scotland Yard, FBI, and other places were using his work.
The head of the police department said, the resources will be there. All the resources that you need will be there as soon as there's evidence. And it's exactly what happened. As soon as the property was identified and they got on the property, all the resources were there. But the resources were needed to get there, and they weren't available.
It's very sad that they didn't take action with Detective Rosmos' information. Because I can tell you straight up, we probably would have saved about 15 women's lives. And one of them would have been Zarina Abasway's life, who went missing in the summer of 2001. She came by to see me every single night I worked. I knew her from the holding cells, and I knew her subsequently on when I went to work on the health outreach van. Zarina would show up and say, hi, Mom, just want to talk to you. My daughter knew her. She was accepted. On occasion, I'd go to the Coquitlam Center, and I'd hear this voice, Mom, and I'd look over, and there's Zarina. Bless her heart, she's running towards me for a hug. And I'm more than willing to give her a hug, her in her pink spandex. But there she is, she was out visiting her foster parents. We bumped into each other. Other people may wonder, who is this girl? She was my girl for so many years. And to see this girl's picture appear on that poster was like losing my child. Manny will attest to that, because she was like a child to me. She wrote me letters.
She's got a funny girl, good sense of humor, and but heavily addicted to drugs and into the prostitution scene in a big way. So she's quite vulnerable. What's your favorite song?
Spice Girls.
Which one? Which song though? You like the Spice Girls?
Oh yeah, I like them all, but I don't remember the songs.
What do you want to do in 5 years? Where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing?
I want to go back to school actually, because I quit school when I was in actually grade 8.
If you looked at her medical records, it would show you that she was hugely traumatized, beaten almost to death, and having plastic surgery done to her head and plates put in and stuff. She was, be savagely raped, and it's a wonder she never died earlier. About some stranger picking you up? Like, what if there is somebody going around murdering all these girls? Aren't you worried about the next trick that you pull might be him?
Yeah, but I always go by my sixth sense.
Instinct.
Yeah. If I don't like the way the guy is, then I won't go with him.
You killed Serena and Mona, agreed?
I won't admit to anything yet.
Well, it's a simple question.
No, I won't admit to anything yet, but go ahead.
All right, so that's the girl, that's the one with the inhaler.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I won't admit to anything yet, but go ahead.
Would I be right in saying, Willie, that you had reached the stage where you just no longer sort of really viewed these girls as being worth anything?
Mm-hmm.
And you killed them?
No. I was good. I had one more plan, but that was it. That was the end of it. That was the last. I was going to shut her down. That's why I was just sloppy. Just the last one.
You were going to do one more?
But that's that.
She doesn't want to harbor on what happened in her physical body because she wants to be remembered as a spirit. But she wants to say that every sort of unimaginable thing that you can imagine could happen to a physical body happened to her. But her spirit shines lighter, and that's what she wants to get over to people. That no matter what the physical goes through, the spirit shines. She's so emphatic about that. She's here, they're all here when you're working on them. I'm sorry, I gotta say this, mind your own business. That's what she says. It's like, get out of my life. When she's got love, I'm sure if she was in love, she'd love this, but she's not, she's pissed. The part of them that doesn't want to be revealed is their ego. But you know what your job is. This is part of her healing, and at long last, both sides have to be shown. I'm getting big tingles with that.
What will I do? I don't really want me to reveal them.
They haven't got a lot of choice now, love. One of the many reasons you're being asked to do this is to facilitate their healing.
Why do they have to deal if they're already dead?
Oh, souls go on many journeys. You know that. You've done that. That's your been your journey. That's why you're strong enough to do this, because you've done it in your own life.
Maybe it was the abusive relationships that I used to attract in my life. Like, you know, my father was really abusive, and I didn't really have, I don't really know what it's like to have a father, like to grow up with a father. And so the role of a male in my life has really, it was almost like this pattern I had created. So I would attract to me the same type of man, and you know, abusive man. And I would feel shackled and bound to this love because I thought that was love. You know, I thought that I needed to be abused to be loved. Waking up and you have purple arms because you were bound to a bed and beaten, you know, like things that I've really experienced where I had to be strong enough to break out of. I started doing these photos, these photos with the photographer friend of mine. And I would talk about issues of boundaries and I guess some deep-seated issues about life and death, and really at the beginning of it. So I'm showing you something right now that's you would normally see at the end result. Like I wouldn't have this on show. I've really wanted to become a lot more personal about my work, like just really get what's in here, get it out. My own shit, you know? This work is more blatantly sexual than my other work. I guess the relationship to the women could be something to do with power within society, how we use it and abuse it, ourselves and others. I find that a lot of my landscapes, my really, you know, the ethereal, I tend to call them inner landscapes. I find them to be a little bit pretty. And people will comment in a similar capacity. And I think inside of me, artistically, I feel like I want to say more, like something more beneath the surface of that pretty painting, you know, that there's things that are unsaid and hidden and experienced and secrets. The last year of my career has been so busy that I actually took a vacation. When I came back, I went into the gallery, who I signed with. Like, I just went in to say hi, and they offered me a show. The director is on the way today of the gallery to see what I've been doing, our last conversation. She said that there's work that she's likely not going to be able to show because it's too explicit in nature. And there's that part of me that understands right now. Okay, well, they want to be able to sell the work, and they want to be confident in that. And then the other part of me was just like, you know what, I'm going to paint what the fuck I want to paint. In the end, I hid a lot of the images underneath the paintings. It was like I was painting these images of myself and what lives underneath. And I just wonder what's it all for? You know, why am I like this? And I just feel like I'm searching for meaning or something stupid.
When you've got something that's that evil and that dark, you know, and you're choosing to paint about it, you're going to attract, you know, more darkness. It's like pulling the pin off a hand grenade, I think.
good to have my show up, but you know what? It's funny because all I've been talking about is the project, the Forgotten Project. Even though I'm here in person, I think that I'm always like almost obsessive about the project because I really want to finish it. Yeah. I'm really protective. Like, it's great for him to be there at my shows and stuff, but I want to be protective about it. But so I just kind of try to separate the two a little bit. I was going through a bit of a separation and had a baby. I figured that it would give me more stability if I was working for a gallery. I wore a suit every day and I was trying to sell other people's art. And then it just really got me inspired, you know, to see all that amazing work. And so I would go home and, you know, I'd be there with my 2-year-old, trying to work part-time and be a mom and all that kind of thing. And he would go to sleep and I would paint feverishly until 3 in the morning, just nuts. And I think that's what got me through.
I saw a news report, I believe it was 1963, where there was a concern by the mayor of Vancouver who, you know, was talking about Native women being murdered in the Downtown Eastside and wanted to conduct some kind of investigation of that. This was 1963. This isn't new.
The thing that stood out to me the most was the number of First Nation women that were on this poster.
It's a well-researched population, and in different samples, the percentage of Aboriginal women far exceeds their proportion in the population of street-involved women. And the truth of it is, you've got the effect of 200 years of colonization on Aboriginal peoples.
What I see through analysis and academia stems from interference of some kind, interference of government, either through residential school, through forced relocation, through children being adopted out.
Basically, what my father was telling me is that it wasn't just about corporal punishment and being deprived good food, but it was an all-out assault on the culture and the values and the lifestyles of Aboriginal people. I think he was made to feel ashamed of who he was.
And the message was very, very clear, that in order to civilize the savage of the country, you needed to break apart the respect and the place of women. And the men acquired the skill of demeaning their women, of putting them in a lower place than them, and actually physically and other ways abusing those women. So when these young boys and these young girls are watching this, what do you think they relate to when they get into a relationship? Just keeps getting handed down, generation to generation. I think it's society's acceptance that the 500 missing women from the Aboriginal community are not important in the overall growth of the country.
Well, in the very early years when she came to live with us, she grew into a very beautiful young woman, but she was extremely cute as a little girl and very outgoing and very creative. She loved to draw. She loved to act and to perform, to do anything that involved imagination.
I looked at Sarah as a very intelligent young lady, and she was. Intelligent, bright, witty, knew what she wanted, was working, knew she was working, knew what she was selling. and she sold it to me. The more I got to know her, the more I got to love her, and I wish this would have started out different. I wish I could have met her under different circumstances.
This is heroin, right here. I can do that in one fix, and it barely even bothers me. I'm pretty much numb to it, I guess, because I don't get high off it anymore. It just makes me normal. It just makes me able to function. I feel good, but I'm not particularly totally happy, because it's like carrying a big ball and chain around with you for part of your life. I went to jail for a while ago for 6 months, and they made me quit cold turkey, and it was, I would rather been dead. And it hurts when you don't have it. It physically hurts.
Young girls in particular who ended up on the street, and invariably through my interviews with them, I found that over 80% of them had been sexually abused. And a lot of them came from group homes and things like that. They prefer the street over their own home. If you look at the bad date list, there's dozens or scores of twisted, perverted, violent men out there preying on these women. If they're not killing them, they're killing their soul. And then the drugs were a way of coping with that abuse and coping with the lifestyle that they'd found themselves into to sustain their habit. I mean, the biggest pimp of all the low-class working girl down there on the low-class stroll are drugs.
It's hard to process, and so you start to use drugs to cope. The amazing thing about crack cocaine is that it will wipe your memory right now. It totally numbs you and stops that anxiety, the panic, the feelings that come with that kind of post-traumatic stress being triggered.
I can relate to the missing women because of the addiction. A lot of people will just look at addiction as some kind of problem of willpower. Well, just stop. It's not that easy. I'm the guy who was wearing the suit and tie to court, but as 2007 started and the Depicting case started, my addiction was deepening. I was doing hundreds of dollars worth of crack cocaine a day, at times heroin as well. There were times when I was so obsessive compulsive about my crack cocaine use that I was leaving this courthouse behind us, going down to the docks and smoking crack, and then coming back and covering the court. To leave the courtroom, go and file my story, and then go and get high. I'm out doing heavy illicit drugs, and I'm surrounded by sheriffs, police, lawyers, and a Supreme Court judge, and a serial killer sitting right in front of me. A lot of times it got to the point where it just wasn't computing in my head anymore. It was just so confusing. Once you start using, you will obsessively think about it, and you will act compulsively. You will void all valuable relationships in your life. You will not give a damn about anything. All you want is that drug. So if a beat-up old truck with some filthy man stinking of pig shit comes up and offers a handful of crack cocaine, you're gonna do whatever it takes to get what's in his hand.
I don't really consider myself a portrait artist. I can look at one face and look at everything that's wrong with it on a technical level. And that's always a question for me. Am I really saying what I want to say?
people have bought some stranger things than this.
Kind of making my work a bit more contemporary in feel, you know, and changing it up a bit, challenging the viewer. Talking about not being able to speak, you know, if your mouth is stapled. I guess it's a pretty harsh way of saying it, but in a way it's not something that someone would recognize easily, and when they discover what it is in the painting, I think the reaction is stronger than without it. A lot of times as a youngster, as a teenager growing up, I remember feeling this in so many ways, that sexuality and the woman's worth was really dependent upon the outer appearance. And I think as in media, in our culture, pop culture, we really have a displacement of those values. You know, this is how she made a living. The fact that I'm preparing two canvases, one that has pornographic images beside this religious feeling, right and wrong kind of thing, yeah, it makes me question a lot of things about, well, even society, right? Like, this is right. It has to be right because we validate it. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of making this white veil beneath those images and the face that I'll paint. I'm trying to tell the viewer something.
With Pamela's paintings, the way I found out about them was really unfortunate. I was called by 16 by 9, and they told me about the paintings, which I had never heard about before, and they wanted me to go and see them, and they wanted to film me seeing them for the first time. And I just thought that was disgusting, and I had no interest in doing that. And that gave me the feeling that this wasn't about the women, that these paintings were, it made me mistrust the artist as well, because how did that happen?
They were 69 innocent women who went missing, many of them victims of serial killer Robert Pickton. Some were shunned by society, others simply ignored by their families. And even in death, they were forgotten, until now.
Oh dear. I don't want to make you cry, I'm sorry.
They are tears to remember the forgotten.
The idea of their mugshots in many cases, and having them be remembered in an exhibit called The Forgotten as huge one-dimensional victims made us sick.
You can't help but have personal thoughts and feelings trigger stuff in you, and we react. And of course I'm going to become defensive, and I'm going to, how dare you do that? How, I'm angry, mad, upset, pissed off, more hurt than anything, because I see that. And that's a reminder of what the women had gone through. That's a reminder of what had happened to me. That's a reminder about what still continues to go on.
Yeah, I'm pretty attached. I don't want to be, but when you want something so bad and you think that, okay, well, what will be, will be. But I don't know, it would just be so great to be able to show what I've been working on, at the Vancouver Art Gallery. This is a moment I have no control over now. Like, I've already painted how many, and they're coming in. The time they come in, there's going to be almost 50. I'm just going to show my work and talk about what it means to me, and tell her how much I think it belongs at the VAG. It's exhausting, and emotionally, like, it's been affecting my stomach, and I just, when I start, sometimes I'll pass out in the studio, and it's not the lack of water, I think it's just the emotional burden sometimes that I just go through this. I'll see visions of, the trauma and stuff, and just start crying. Like, it's so sorry. She came in here and basically said, you know, we're booked up until 2:13. So even the talk of this is, you know, probably too late for you. But let me send the curators by. I didn't get a sense that she really understood the scope of it. And she basically said, well, you know, I can see us showing one of these. And as soon as she said that, I knew, you don't get it. You're not going to get this until it's 20 years down the road. And you go, oh my God, we totally lost sight of that, the cultural and the historical significance of that body of work. And I truly believe that. So the gallery didn't work out, but you know, a few days later, literally a few days later, I was connected with the director of the Museum of Anthropology. They came in and you know, it was just a different experience. You know, when someone comes in and you're showing the work, and after you show about 20, 30 paintings, you can see that they're actually have become disturbed. They've been affected emotionally, and they say, stop, we want to have a show.
I think it's one thing to be aware of something, and something quite different to actually feel emotionally engaged with it suddenly. And that's what Pamela's works did for me. Suddenly, from statistics and news stories, there was a reality that emerged from my canvases, and this is what hit me. Our challenge is to get out to the public that we are more than just a Northwest Coast Art Museum. We're a forum, and you know, we're Vancouver's institution, which isn't afraid to explore some areas that other institutions might be a little bit more reluctant to explore because of the controversy around them.
I extended an invitation to friends and family because I haven't connected with them over the years so much, because I had to focus on my work and the truth of the project, that just to say, okay, you know what, my door's open to you. I would love to talk to you about the project. I would love to show you the paintings. I'm not trying to open up any wounds with the project, but I think that a lot of some of the families will feel that connection again when they see the paintings, and so it's kind of I just want to be really gentle, you know.
Two weeks from right now, there will be about 3 billion people tuned in right here, right around us in Vancouver. Tuned in to what our city represents, tuned in to the athletes, who are very, very important and should be the center of attention of it. And that's great, we love it. We need to also balance that with what art and creativity represents. And I want to recognize Pamela for an unbelievable gift to all of us, to all of these women and their families. She's done an extraordinary thing.
So February of 2011, we're going to be showing Pamela's The Forgotten. And I think that will really mark a new juncture in the history of the museum and a level of social commitment that I hope we will be able to preserve over the future.
There you go.
Pleasure to meet you. Yeah. Meet you too.
Pamela's preview was interesting in that it brought out sort of two sets of people. It brought out, you know, I guess what you'd call the glitterati, and they're the other people.
There were people there that had zero interest in those forgotten women, absolutely zero. The reason why we were there The sole reason was precisely for these women. And as I recall, I believe Pamela was trying to state that night, and I'm not sure if everybody got it. She even had this one lady come up who talked about the situation because she was connected to one of the ladies that had been murdered.
I just know a lot of them from drinking and working the streets with them. She should have had a little scar. I don't know if you can see it on the picture, but she had like a little scar on her lip, but that's not important. We used to have a tarp, tie it on here, hook it up, have a little couple of blankets and sleep here until the guy in there used to chase us away. But sometimes he didn't. For two young girls, it's dangerous. My mom would bring home guys that will sexually abuse me. One time I hollered to her and she stood in the door, and I still can hear her say, "Be a big girl, be a big girl."
Tonight is the show for the women of the shelter. We have a show here on Main Street outside of the Downtown Eastside. What I wanted to do was integrate the women outside of the core of the Downtown Eastside into another area of the city and get them to, you know, feel a sense of accomplishment by having their own show, having their work up on the wall, and letting them shine.
I want to show people what I can do without doing drugs and alcohol. This is sold? Holy moly! Wow! I am in shock! Woo! Damn!
Oh, don't worry, it's not a swear. Shit.
When the first February 14th Women's Memorial March began, there were about 28 women that walked in that march. And last year, there were 4,000 to 5,000 people. February 14th universally is a day of showing love, caring, compassion, and we wanted to have February 14th as the day to express our love from the community for the murdered and missing women. When we found out that Pamela Masik's display was going to be shown at the Museum of Anthropology, it was really surprising that the museum, first it's on First Nations land, would allow something like that to be displayed, that horrific.
We had always taken great care to honor the memories of women that we knew and that have gone missing from the Downtown Eastside community and women that have been murdered. Very careful attention to that, to the protocol and care. And it was very clear that this artist that, you know, had not taken that care.
Our issues were very pointed at the whole racial discussion with what the artwork was purporting to represent. Was Masik, as an artist, the right person to address Aboriginal women issues? That was my question. Did MOA provide the correct consultation process for those Aboriginal families within the paintings?
Anthony became, I said that, you know, there's likely that if the exhibit went ahead that there would be a protest, a pretty strong protest. And he was really excited about that. He thought that would heighten the interest in the whole exhibit.
The function of a museum is not just to show beautiful things. The task of a museum, I think, is to encourage debate and to bring the arts and culture together. And certainly that idea of the museum as a forum is where we're trying to drive MOA. Pamela has kind of allowed us, she's given us a starting point where we can look at these issues worldwide and we can see just what an important problem it is and why we need to act and take it seriously. Not just in Vancouver, not just in Canada, but worldwide. This is something that shouldn't exist in beginning of the 21st century. It's a crime or crimes against humanity, and it's being perpetrated on such a large scale in so many different places that it's got to be taken seriously, and it's got to be engaged with, and it's got to end.
If we look at the origin of prostitution law, the laws that were written at the turn of the century were those that prevailed up until about 1972. It became what was called the soliciting law. Basically, what it said was that you can't solicit in a public place for the purpose of prostitution.
You know, the traditional picture you see of the sex worker leaning in the window of the car, negotiating her terms of employment, if you will. In that time, she's doing an environmental scan to see if the guy's got a gun, you know, is he sober, is he living in his car? You know, she's assessing the danger level. Under this law, that's illegal. So you have to get in the car and close the door in order to have a private conversation.
Prostitution then moved around the city. It was displaced deliberately and accidentally as a result of a series of different law enforcement initiatives.
Where we go, it's cold over there. I mean, it's an industrial sprawl. It's dark, there's no traffic, you're freezing.
And it's in those circumstances when women are isolated on a corner that they can be picked up unseen. All one has to do is look at the patterns of serial killing of women involved in sex work. It's almost always street prostitutes who are selected. I mean, you can go to the Green River Killer, the Yorkshire Ripper, any number of other killers of people involved in prostitution choose street prostitutes.
To the families of the missing women, I would say to you that I wish from the bottom of my heart that we would have caught him sooner. I wish that the several agencies involved, that we could have done better in so many ways. I wish that all the mistakes that were made, we could undo. And I wish that more lives would have been saved.
So this is the O'Dane Gallery. It's our new temporary exhibition space, measures about 6,000 square feet. And we're going to need every square foot of that for the Masik exhibition. Universities are open institutions. They're institutions of dialogue. They're institutions that are crucial for life in any democratic society. We have an obligation, an ethical obligation, to mount shows like this.
The overall feel that I would like to achieve is to have the viewer feel like they're on exhibition. And that's why they're so large and demanding in a way. There's that question of who's looking at who kind of thing.
We thought that the impact of the exhibition is going to be extremely strong. In fact, what we've been trying to do is come up with some schemes, and in order not to make it so spectacular, but to tone it down somewhat. As part of this, we've been looking at creating a second room, a second gallery, which will be almost like a decompression room.
I think it's a great idea. Because the museum show is in place, because there's a sense of hope that the show and the work is going to be taken quite seriously. I'm pretty happy about that. So I'm in a good headspace right now. But you know, it's been a ride, it's been a journey, it's been challenging, you know.
An exhibition of portraits of missing and murdered women has been canceled by the Museum of Anthropology. They apparently are concerned that the works will be distressing to the public.
In this case, you have a museum that was rebranding itself as an institution with a social conscience that was going to put on controversial shows that had really important things to say to the public about issues that were very important to our society. And when they censor an exhibit like that, it becomes worse than censorship. It's censorship with hypocrisy.
There was no censorship whatsoever. Censorship was never even remotely considered.
Just to go through all that bullshit. It's crazy because it hasn't even been seen, you know, like in person.
Marlene George is coordinator with the Memorial March.
Pamela Masik's display of the 69 portraits, they're not very flattering pictures. She had further defaced the portraits to make it even more grotesque.
She's a fairly rich middle-class white woman painting pictures of some of the poorest of our society. If she'd just taken the time to go to the families and say, is this okay, she wouldn't have this problem.
I think Pamela's message is not to forget these women. A lot of people just don't want to see it. They think it's going to go away. That's going to make it go away. But I think it's something that everybody should see.
Anthony Shelton was talking about how important this was to get out there. The mayor here, Mayor Gregor Robertson, was talking about how important it was not to cover this up. You know, nobody wants to see this brushed under the carpet, and that's exactly what they've done. All I got from Anthony was academic gobbledygook.
We'd been trying to create this consensus and put this conglomerate of different interests together. And whereas sometimes it started to look as if it was taking place, it then dissolved again. And really we were unable to actually create this, this broad arrangement of different organizations with consensus that we would use it to do all these different kinds of events around the exhibition.
It saddens me that it was canceled, but from the beginning, with the intention I had, I truly, really wanted to speak for people who couldn't speak.
Like I said before, this isn't meant to be a memorial collection. It's meant to confront the issues that I'm talking about. And I saw my art as a way to reach people that might not necessarily have looked at the issues that were ignored for so many years. My vision for that project and where it needs to go and what I feel. It's not necessarily about having a museum show on my resume or, you know, it's actually not that at all. That's not why I did it. And remembering that.
It just became more and more shocking for us, and we were unable to let that kind of exploitation happen.
We were aware of those attacks on Pamela and the reason for her doing this particular body of works. They were not presented in a formal way by any of those groups to the museum.
I wrote a formal letter to Anthony Shelton telling them about the concerns that the Memorial March had about this exhibit.
I have it right here. It is very offensive to many of these families that the image of their beloved daughters, mothers, sisters, and aunties has been stolen and used by this ambitious artist to further her own career. She casts herself as a heroine to this community and to these women. In fact, she's painted these images largely without the consent of their families and shown them little tangible respect. Ms. Masik's work violates these women. Her images show the women with faces slashed, stitched together, and overlaid with language and imagery that is very disturbing to the people whose voices she claims to represent. The media have been using those images for years. I've used them over and over and over again with content associated much more disturbing than Pamela's show.
We have reason to believe that there is a strong possibility that some of the product from the Picton farms may still be sitting in some people's freezers in the Lower Mainland. But there is no evidence that any of this material went into the commercial food trade.
We are asking that anyone who is still perhaps in possession of any meat they obtained from that property to please contact the Missing Women Task Force.
The rope was tight, the knife was sharp, she barely felt a thing. Body
kicked up the generator and began processing. This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy ate Margaret. And this one sucked on the bone.
First, you ask yourself what kind of monster is doing this performance, making little of these women's experience. Then you ask yourself, and what kind of monsters are in the crowd actually responding to it? But at the same time, there's plenty of subjects in modern society that are too unpleasant to be part of everyday discourse, and often through comedy, even black comedy, it's the only way that these matters are allowed to surface. Nobody really cared about what was going on for years and years until they found a scapegoat. But it's okay, because now we found the one guy who was the problem, and he's in jail, so no sex workers are going to be vulnerable ever again, right?
The artist's motivations don't matter. What matters is the art that's produced, what it says, how important that is.
I do understand why it's upsetting for the families and for other residents in the community, but that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to make you feel.
Part of what's always happened with the Downtown Eastside neighborhood and with Indigenous women and with women sex workers, has been that other people who aren't involved tell the story. You know, it's always been the case of speaking for.
When the most marginalized people in our society are saying, hey, like, don't talk about us that way, is that censorship? And when the Museum of Anthropology listens to those voices, is that censorship, or is that finally someone hearing the voices that are not heard so much?
Our questions and our analysis always stemmed on, well, what about the viewer? The history of Canada is not well known regarding Aboriginal people. So if I looked at and examined who would be walking through those doors, would they have the correct information to view these paintings, particularly Aboriginal women, and know exactly what brought them to the street?
Certainly, I think the communities and a number of people helped us understand some of the issues that the exhibition might provoke in the community.
I was really stunned, actually. What Anthony Shelton told us, he learned a lot that he didn't know before. He wanted to do something that would really raise awareness, and he realized that what they were doing wasn't going to achieve that.
I thought it was a form of chicken shit, as quite honestly is what I think it was, as much as it was an issue of censorship. I told the folks at the Museum of Anthropology, I find it a little ironic that we're here, actually. And I pointed around to all these ancient carvings and works of art that were once panned and called evil works, were the work of savages. And now a bunch of people show up here saying her work isn't worth a pinch of coon shit. That really offended me and really got me angry.
When I first saw anything on the paintings, there were a couple of them there that just really upset me. And when she explained it to me, I could kind of understand. But I thought, oh, I don't think I'd even want the family members to see these.
To lose a loved one and then to have your loved one portrayed in such a horrible, ugly way is beyond imaginable. I don't know how my daughter was murdered. I envision all kinds of horrible things happening to her. So to see that ugliness would just intensify, you know, the thought of how your daughter died.
Well, I'm sure with some of them being so abstract that, you know, maybe it is going to hurt some of the family members because they're looking at a portrait of their loved one. But I'm really hoping and praying that they look at this as Pamela drawing out the hurt and the pain so that we can show the rest of the world that these women went through horrific things in their life.
I still feel like maybe we should have really looked at her work. Maybe we could have really looked and seen what she had to say about it. Maybe we could have used it to bring attention to more about what was going on. You know, there's all these maybes. So why do we react so quickly? Why do we, when, you know, when it's still happening but with other groups? Why do we choose and pick only one person?
I got pneumonia. I don't even want to think about the project going on another year. I want it to do some good. And I don't know how I'm gonna pull off what I need to. I'm gonna try my best to do it. I can't even think about if the project went on without, I don't know.
People conflate the murder and the life that she lived as if they are exactly the same thing. They are not. As if she started to die when she ran away, or when she started using drugs, or when she started selling sex, or no, she died when she was murdered. That's when she died. She was alive, she was living, and her life was filled with meaning, and it had love in it all the way through until it was taken from her. I think that's really important for people to understand.
He, Picton, not only ruined our lives, he's ruined 78 children's lives. Those children, when they grow up, they're not going to have grandmothers. So he's ruined generations to come, not just the people here now. He's ruined a lot of lives.
This is what the coroner had gave us today. This is all we have of Marnie. As parents and caring people and relatives who knew and loved Marnie, at least we have something. A lot of the families have absolutely nothing.
A little bit jealous. It's stupid to say that, but for the fact is, they have remains, they have something that they were able to bring home. Like just a fragment of a bone, tip of a finger, anything would have been satisfactory that I could have had at least that. But I have nothing, and that's hard. When my mother always told me and always felt that it's hard to accept someone's death when there is no funeral.
I had to slowly puzzle pieces back together because I was still living in the foster home, so a lot of the things were hidden from me. Every article, anything that had my mom's name in it, anything to do with Picton, I would keep. And I ended up having a really, really large scrapbook. I finally realized I was getting really sick and just obsessed with it, and I'm not really getting too many answers. I'm just obsessing over the wrong things. Last time I saw my mom, I was 5, and then at 8, I find out she's dead and I'm never gonna see her again. So for that, burning the book, it was really, really good for me, just healing everything. Sail on, children, sail on by, because time is an ocean and it ends at the shore. She's been gone from our touch, but never our memories, gone from our sight, but never our hearts. So I wrote that for my mommy.
Well, I grew up in the country. We had 11 acres of land, and I would spend a lot of my life in the forest, just in trees, around nature, lying in the grass. And the forest taught me one thing: there are no ends, there's just beginnings. My mother lives on every day in me. We look almost identical. So she lives on in everything I do. I'm living the life she should have had, but she couldn't have. And I embrace that every day.
I know it's been so many years and they've dug up the dirt and they've done everything, but for some strange reason, I can't explain it, some spiritual reason, I need to walk on that farm.
I've always wanted to go out to the farm. It was just an inner thing with me that once I saw that opportunity with that hole in that gate, I was gone.
I'm standing at the fence and I knew that I couldn't go on the property. I think that would cause me to break down. Although we've been through so much, there's a little part of you, just a little spark left in your heart that hopes you'll turn a corner and you'll see them there.
Go a little bit closer so you can get the other part of the conveyor belt.
Walking over that mound and finding all those things that we did see there, knowing that that's his property, that's his things. Like, to me, I always assumed that that property was all cleared up.
Garbage, it was basically garbage, but garbage to most people, but could be treasures for me in there. So I'm going down there to look. Are you coming, Lillian? And it's been burnt not that long ago because I can still smell the heat. I can still smell burnt ashes. Oh my God. Okay, there's a shirt here.
Oh, yes.
A white shirt, a man's shirt. A dirty old shirt, probably Willie Picton's. Okay, stay calm, Lynn. Marnie was on that piece of land. Yeah, at least I can be saying, I was there looking for you, Marnie, and I walked in your shoes, Marnie. Not the tragedy that happened to her, but at least I walked the same dirt.
I felt that this is what I needed to do. This is what I needed to bring myself closer to my sister, would be to be on the grounds that she walked.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. We smiled and we laughed and we cried and we said goodbye.
After the museum show was canceled, I store the paintings, and they'll continue to be in storage until they're shown in the right place, in the right light. And for me, it needs to be in a place that's very well respected, and that the work gets respected and the women get respect. At the time when I started it, I was doing a lot of performance work. I had some record years with sales, and instead of doing something with that income to either further my position in my industry or my personal life, I essentially took every penny and put it into this collection. Was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. It allowed me to grow as well. Like, it gave me a gift to, first of all, accept and let go of where I've come from. was a moment where I remember writing a letter to my mom, and it wasn't a nice letter. And it was a moment when I stopped talking to her, and I was very angry. I was so angry with her because I saw this woman who wouldn't speak up and protect her children. And then there came a point in the collection as I was painting that I understood that just like me and these women, that my mother is a woman too. And she had her fears, and she had her life experiences that weren't necessarily pretty, and she was scared, and my father scared her. So I learned how to forgive, and I learned how to understand that it wasn't her fault. I can't take back what I've done. The work it's going to speak for itself. But if I can take back any of the hurt, I would, because the families have already been through a lot. And every day they have to live with what happened. And when I was creating this work, and especially at the beginning, I really thought that they would be seeing that I was doing something for them. But because of the paintings not being memorialized, I'm talking about violence. I'm talking about not having a voice. I'm talking about not being seen, not being heard. They're not going to be pretty because it's not pretty. This is, to me, what needs to be confronted.
This inquiry has been challenging. We knew from the beginning it would not be easy. How could it be? We're dealing with the worst mass murder in Canadian history. Keep in mind that these women, missing and murdered women, were forsaken twice, once by society at large and again by the police. I've reviewed in great detail the evidence that the critical police failings were manifest in recurring patterns of error. And the results